We won't do that.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you here. Now during DocSun, I'm gonna say, you are a big deal, Bob, look at this. Bob, so starting, let's just ground everyone here, right? Can you tell us about this amazing study? Who were the participants? How did everything start? Why? How did Harvard follow these people all these years?
Well, the study started, as Susane told you, in 1938. And as far as we know, it's the longest study of the same human lives that's ever been done. And it started as two studies, both on the Harvard University campus, but the studies didn't even know about each other. One was started at the Student Health Service at Harvard College. It was sophomores from the classes of 1939 to 42. And it was meant to be a study of sort of normal development from adolescence to young adulthood. So of course, if you want to study normal development, you study all white males from Harvard, right? Now it's the most politically incorrect study sample you could ever have, and we've been, every time we apply for funding to NIH, we have to explain why it's still important to study these people. So, a group of Harvard College undergraduates. John F. Kennedy was part of that group. Ben Bradley, who was the editor of the Washington Post for many years. And the other study was started at Harvard Law School by Sheldon Gluck, a law professor, and Eleanor Gluck, a social worker. And they were interested in juvenile delinquency, and they were particularly interested in how some children born into really disadvantaged circumstances managed to stay on good paths. And so what they did was went to the city of Boston, to this neighborhood, to the North End, the South End, Dorchester, Southie, all these neighborhoods that were here, and looked not just for people from young kids from poor families, but kids from families that were known for bad social problems, known to 5 social service agencies on average for domestic violence, parental substance abuse, mental illness, extreme poverty. And among those families, they found 456 boys who were not in trouble with the law, who were doing okay. And they wanted to study how is it that these children were able to do that. So you have a total of 724 people combined, young men from the Harvard group and the inner city group. And then what we did was we expanded it. We did not want it to remain a study of all males. And so we expanded to all the spouses. Almost all of them got married. And we expanded to all the spouses, and then gradually to their children, over half of whom are female. So we have gender balance in the study. We do not have any people of color in the study, and that's the biggest limitation of what we study. And so one of the things that we're careful to do, so for example, when I tell you about study findings tonight, I'll only tell you about findings that have been corroborated in other groups, in other samples, more diverse samples, because we don't want to simply present as normal life the experiences of white people. And so we're taking care to make sure that we bring in other sources of information about human development from much more diverse groups of people.
Phenomenal, right? And how they follow these participants along the journey was very interesting. We can see that from the book. And Bob, there comes the question, what is the biggest takeaway then of this study? What is happiness?
Well, we published like over 200 papers and over a dozen books, and but there were 2 big takeaways. One won't surprise you. It's that when we take care of our health, it matters enormously for living longer and having more years of disability-free life. Huge, it makes, you know, up to a decade difference between the people who took care of themselves and the people who did not. But that wasn't a surprise by the time we began to write about that. That was known. What was a surprise was that when we started by saying, okay, our original people have reached the age of 80, and we want to find out, could we predict, say from midlife, what are the best predictors of who's going to be alive and who's going to be healthy and who's going to be happy at age 80? And so we were looking for blood pressure and cholesterol and those kinds of things. And those were important, but by far the strongest predictor of who was going to be healthy, happy, and alive at age 80 was the strength of their relationships, how satisfied people were at age 50 with their relationships. And at first we didn't believe that, because how could it be that relationships would actually get into our bodies and change our physiology? That was our question. Other groups, other research studies began to find very similar things about the power of social connection, not just for happiness, that made sense, but for physical health. So that, you know, what the studies were finding is that people who are more connected and more warmly connected to people are less likely to have heart disease. They're less likely to develop type 2 diabetes, arthritis, some of the preventable illnesses of aging. And so one of the things that happens when you're a researcher, you want to know, well, how does this work? Because you don't really believe something until you see, well, what could be a possible pathway from happy relationships to less heart disease, for example. And so we've spent the last 10 years in our lab, and many other labs have been trying to understand how exactly does this happen. And I could tell you about that at some point if you want to know.
Exactly. Do you want to tell us now? Do you guys want to know? Yeah? Well, let's be healthy, right? Physically healthy too.
Yeah. So the best information we have, the best data, is about stress. What we know is that social isolation is a stressor. And actually, they've studied people and found that when people are sleeping alone, they sleep less soundly. Loneliness is the kind of stressor that raises your blood pressure. It produces chronic inflammation throughout the body that breaks down different body systems. And so what we found was that this stress hypothesis is one that, first of all, if you have stress in your life, which I expect all of us do, that's not a problem. So we're all meant to, when we are stressed, react to it with the fight or flight response. That's not a problem. But then what's meant to happen is that once the stressor is gone, we come back to baseline. And what we think happens for people who are lonely or people who are in really acrimonious relationships is that their bodies never come back to baseline. They stay in a kind of low-level fight or flight response, and that's what ends up breaking down the immune system and other body systems.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Bob, how can you explain to us, though, loneliness in a crowd world? Like, many of us are surrounded by people, but we just feel alone. Why? Why is loneliness so harmful in a world that is so crowded and we are supposed to be connected?
Yeah, I mean, now the estimates are that 1 in 3 or at least 1 in 4 people will tell you on any given day that they're lonely, most of the time. And that's a huge increase from previous years. So that's why Vivek Murthy, our last Surgeon General, talked about loneliness as an epidemic, because it is. And what his report is really good, and you can download it if you're interested. And one of the problems with loneliness is that, first of all, it's a subjective experience. So, we can be lonely in a crowd, we can be lonely in a marriage, or we can be perfectly happy as a Zen monk isolated on a mountaintop, right? So loneliness is in the eye of the beholder. But what we find is that the causes of loneliness are multiple. There's no single cause, and what that means is there's no single remedy, which is sort of, I think we wish there were something simple that we could do, some simple intervention. So one of the things we often say is, well, it would be great if people would just, if they're lonely, reach out to other people. But the problem with loneliness is that often you don't feel like reaching out to other people. Many people who are lonely are ashamed of being lonely, or depression makes us more isolated, or anxiety. Having no substance abuse does that as well. It's very isolating. And so those are some of the mental health issues that foster loneliness, but there's also social issues. I mean, you know, one of the things we know is that in many developing countries now, for example in China, people are moving from their home cities and villages, like where their family lives, and they're moving to other cities for economic opportunity. And what happens is they leave parents, they leave grandparents, they leave friends, and they go to these places where they don't know anybody, and they feel very isolated. And this is happening in India, it's happening in lots of traditional cultures, where the cultures kind of break down because of more social mobility. So that's another cause. There are systemic issues, like the way we construct our cities, the way we construct our neighborhoods. So Dan Buettner's work with the Blue Zones has been really good work in trying to understand why some communities are not lonely and people don't feel isolated. And much of it has to do with the built environment. And there are architects working on these issues and writing really important stuff about it. So those are just a few of the many causes of social isolation and loneliness.
So I'm gonna ask a question that I remember Mel Robbins' podcast with you. Mel Robbins?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when she mentions it, actually I think she's a member here, Quin. And during the podcast, which actually she cries in the beginning, right? Because she said something that resonated with me. Are we getting happiness wrong then, Bob? What is wrong with us? And I'm sorry, I'm saying not Dr. Waldinger, because it's hard to look at Bob and not say Bob. Are we getting happiness wrong? Why we do that?
Yeah, I mean, we are in many ways getting happiness wrong because we're given all these messages about what's supposed to make us happy. You know, and that, I mean, think of all the ads we see all day long, and you know, everywhere we look, that give us these messages about, you know, you'll be blissfully happy if you buy this car, or if you serve this brand of pasta for dinner, you know, or if you use this face cream, you know, and even though, as I say it, of course, it sounds ridiculous, when you're given these messages all day long, and particularly when you're a young person given these messages, you come to believe, well, that must be it. You know, and there's a lot of messaging about how fame and wealth and high achievement are gonna make us happy. And we know that they don't. They don't make us unhappy, they're just separate. There's some very happy, wealthy, famous, high-achieving people, and some deeply unhappy people. And we found, for example, in our inner city group, you know, these kids born into such disadvantaged circumstances, as they lived their lives, they were on average just as happy as the Harvard guys. There were really happy people in both groups. There were really miserable people in both groups. So privilege certainly privilege buys you the situations that make you more likely to be happy. So when we get our basic material needs met, we are happier. It's really important. But making a lot of money over and above that doesn't make people happier. It's not a route to happiness. And I think, so one of the things we get wrong is if I make a whole lot of money, that's gonna make me happy. Or if I win the Nobel Prize, some people are really obsessed with the Nobel Prize. And, you know, I guarantee you it doesn't make you happier. Seriously. I mean, you know, that these badges of achievement look like they're gonna make us happier, and they don't. Now, the path to getting there, the work that you might do to get a particular prize, that could be very satisfying. And so that often what we get wrong is the end point, the badge, and think that's the ticket, where it's really what we do every day, minute by minute, that makes us happy or unhappy.
Yeah, and maybe that's related to the social fitness that you talk about on the book, or when you mention the book invites us to be curious, and that word has been with me for a long time now. Carl Rogers mentioned a lot, curiosity, be curious. Can you talk to us about curiosity, social fitness, and choices?
Sure. So social fitness is just a phrase that we coined for the book that we wrote, and it was really just because it seemed really analogous to physical fitness. That what we found in the study was that the people who were best at relationships were doing things to nurture their relationships every day, day by day, right? They would be the family that invited people over. They would be the family that hosted the potlucks, or they would be the people who reached out to their friends, often and stayed in touch. And so what we began to see it as something that you do frequently, you do a lot of, and that it's active. Because I think one of the things that I always thought personally was friendships will take care of themselves. Family relationships will take care of themselves. And it turns out that they don't. That relationships will wither, perfectly good relationships will wither away if we don't, have contact, if we don't tend to them. And so what we began to write about was what we observed in all of these lives we studied, which is that if you want to have people in your life actively, you need to be active in keeping that going.
I look at my friends here, so I'm
Yeah.
when you were saying that. And there is also part of the book that we mentioned, was very interesting when you mentioned the participants who entered the train ride, and one did not talk and the other one talked. Can you tell us about that? Because John is the king of talking to everybody. And after reading the book, I'm like, oh, my husband's like that, right?
Jennifer's really good at talking.
So we got better hands, right? Really good better hands.
So this was a study, it wasn't a study that I did. It was a study done at the University of Chicago. A psychologist named Nick Epley and his team. And what they did this experiment where they ran, Chicago has an extensive rail system, so a lot of people go to work every day on the train. And what they did was they selected, they at random, groups of people, all ages, commuting on these routes. And what they said to people was they were going to assign them randomly to do one of two things. Either do what they normally did on their commute. So, it might be just looking at their phone or reading the newspaper or whatever it was. Or they were assigned to talk to a stranger. And they asked people beforehand, how do you think you're going to like this? And the people who were assigned to talk to a stranger really strongly said, we don't think we're going to like this. We're not going to enjoy this. So then after people completed their assignment and they got off the train, the researchers asked them to rate how much they enjoyed their commute. And the people who were forced to talk to strangers were significantly happier as they got off the train. And what it points to is this kind of natural reluctance that certainly I notice in myself, and that I think most of us have to really break the ice and just talk to people. But if you think back about your own experience, how many times have you gotten a negative response compared to how many times you've gotten a positive response? Mostly it's positive, because mostly people are happy to connect, unless they're having a really terrible day or something. So I think that study kind of showed that our baseline nature is to not want to connect, and that it's possible to do something about that.
Very, very interesting. Now we're going to be talking to people everywhere, right, guys? Dr. Waldinger, Bob, also, can you tell us, I know that during your TED Talk, by the way, John Werner, our member who does the TED Talk at the Quin, produced Dr. Waldinger in 2015?
15, yeah.
One of the most viewed TED Talks of all times, guys. I encourage you who did not hear yet. Amazing. And you say something, good relationships keep us healthier, period. How about when we realize that like, oh, the book says that all friends matter, everybody matters, but there are some relationships that maybe we don't want to get along with, or some people that we don't feel that we connect with, right? What can we do to maybe change that, or what is your advice for us related to?
Well, it's always complicated, and when you study all these lives, what you learn is that there's no single solution for everybody. One size never fits all, and certainly doesn't fit all relationships. So there are some relationships that are so damaging and hurtful to one or both parties that they need to be stepped away from. I mean, certainly when there's violence and when it's extreme. And so then the question becomes, when is it worth working on relationships? And that's really, I think many people give up too easily and walk away from relationships. Other people stay too long. So again, it's a matter of discernment. But my wife Jennifer is a psychologist who's an expert in couples therapy, and she sees a lot of couples, many of whom get tremendous help from couples therapy, and then they go on and have much better relationships. So I think one of the things we talk about, in the book is the idea that if you've invested a lot in a relationship, a lot of time, maybe you have children together, maybe you have property together, that you don't want to just walk away easily. And so you want to do what you can to see if things can improve, right? Through dialogue, through help you can get help from clergy, you can get help from therapists. And then there are just some relationships where you say, no, gotta step away. There are also, the other thing is that if you think about it, most of our relationships don't last. I mean, how many of you are still friends with everybody that you were in the 4th grade with? Nah, right? So the other thing that does happen is that there are natural cycles where people move in and out of our lives. That's okay. That's not anything to mourn. I think that the question is, for each person, do I have enough people in my life? Do I have the kind of relationships that I want? And that's, again, a very subjective experience. And actually, here's something I do want to mention, because you could get the impression from what I'm saying that you really have to be an extrovert or your life is over, right? And that is so not true. That we're all on some kind of spectrum from being introverts to being extroverts. And there's absolutely nothing wrong or less healthy about being an introvert than being an extrovert. Introverts are people who get more refueling by alone time, and they really need and are nourished by alone time. And extroverts get more of their energy from other people. And neither is better or worse than the other. What we do find in our study is that we think everybody needs at least one or two secure relationships, meaning people they feel they can count on. At one point we asked our participants on a questionnaire, who could you call in the middle of the night if you were sick or scared? List everybody. And most people could list, a few people. But some people couldn't list anybody. And we think that those are the people who are more in trouble. That doesn't matter if you're an introvert, as long as you have the kind of safe person or a couple of people who you need in your life.
Yeah, that brings meaning, right?
Yes.
Meaning.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And when you mentioned that, I also thought about the mini Harvard study, which so Dr. Waldinger has a class from Harvard that I had the privilege to do that, and I saw people from all around the world trying to find out about happiness. That means that we are craving meaning, right? And many of those classmates, they were older, and they said, I retired, my kids are gone, and I'm just trying to find out what should I do with myself now. So there is no age, right, to find out how to be happy, how to be connected. And the study shows us that.
Well, because, I mean, they do this with people in college, they do this with teenagers, and they do this with people in their 70s, where you ask yourself questions about sort of where am I in my life right now? How have things changed from, where do I think I am in the life cycle? Do I have more of my life ahead of me or more of it behind me? And that makes a real difference in our perspective. In fact, one of the things we do, I think you know about this, we ask people to, when they come to these sessions, the first session, we ask them to bring a photograph of themselves when they were about half their current age. And then we ask them to share the photographs and to talk with each other about what life seemed like and what seemed most important when they were the age they were in the photograph, and how it looks similar and how it looks different now. And it gets into really lively conversations because it helps people get some perspective on how they have changed and how their sense of what life's about changes as they've gone through their lives. And that's one of the things, of course, that we get to look at studying all these lives over time.
So the mini Harvard study is basically looking over a picture of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And that makes us, like ordinary people, just to be part of the study. Why not? And it's powerful. It's really, really important. We are going to move towards the end, but before, there is something I would like to ask you about Neugarten's clock, like the social pressure that we have, and how can we deal with the social pressure in our lives, right? Sometimes we are in a stage and we just want to be somewhere else, and we think that, like, oh, maybe I'm too old, I did not have kids yet, am I going to be happy? Can you just tell us more about that, the two differences between normal life stages from the Ericksons and what Neugarten told us about the social clock, that sometimes we catch ourselves just under pressure.
Well, yeah, I mean,
how we can just be happy even though we don't follow those rules.
Yeah. There are a lot of, I bet a lot of you have read like Erik Erikson or Gail Sheehy's passages, or there are a lot of life stage theories, and they're very valuable. I mean, they sort of talk about what happens to most of us at different points in our lives. But there was a wonderful developmental theorist, Bernice Neugarten, who wrote about a concept she called feeling like you're on time in your life or you're off time. And what she meant was, do I feel like I'm doing the things that the culture expects me to do at this point in my life, or not? And that there's, this social pressure that you're talking about is, am I supposed to be married now? Am I supposed to be having children? Am I supposed to be retiring? There are all these kind of internalized expectations that we have about what we're supposed to be. And what Neugarten said was that we can get kind of distressed about our own lives, often needlessly, because of the sense that we're off time, that we're not following the norm. The thing that I think is so great about, say, the last 50 years, at least in our culture, is that there are lots more different pathways for people. It's not so much, there were these more rigid rules for women particularly, and for men. And now, like, women go out and start companies in their 50s and 60s, right? And, the women in our original study all stayed home. They were all homemakers. They were often highly educated, but they stayed home. They did volunteer work. Many of them could have been CEOs of companies, but that's not what nobody did that, in the 1950s. And so now I think this sense, there are many different ways to feel like your life is just fine and it's perfectly on time, and you're because there's so many people taking different pathways than there were in the World War II generation that we started studying.
That's awesome. Things have changed.
Yeah.
And the Quin community, we are strong women out there. We have amazing gatherings, and I'm so proud to be a member. Bob, remember you proposed the activity for us to text someone?
Oh, yeah.
How about that?
Okay, if you guys will do this. So
this is fun.
Because one of the things that listening to me talk about relationships could give you the impression of, I've got so much going on in my life. I have so much to do, and now I have to do this relationship thing too. You know, like, you know, another project, another huge amount of work. So I want you to do a little exercise with me to show you that this is not heavy lifting. So if you don't already have it out, take out your phone.
I love the silence in the room.
What?
I love the silence.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody very
It's
quiet.
it's dangerous getting you all on your phones. You know? We won't get your attention back. Okay, but now think of somebody who you haven't been in touch with in a while, and you sort of miss, and you wish, oh, you know, I wish I were more in touch. So think of that person, and send them a text or an email, however you usually communicate, and just say, hi, I was just thinking of you and wanted to say hello, or whatever you would say. Just do that. Take a minute to do that. Jennifer's doing it.
Well done, everybody.
Yeah, so that was,
Wow.
you know, yeah, just take your time, finish up. But as you can see, this is not a lengthy exercise. It's not a lot of work. And then hopefully during the Q&A, we can remember to ask if anybody gets anything back. Because it's really fun to hear what comes back. But it's really just a mini demonstration that you could decide, you know, every day I'm going to pick a time and do this. You know, if you take the train to work, you could do it every day on the way to work. You could just text somebody. You could, and so these small touches, especially now with digital communication, mean that it's easier to do this and to stay connected to each other in this way. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for indulging me. And now hopefully.
We are a part of the study now.
Yeah, you
Officially.
Yeah.
Yes, there is power in connection, for sure, Bob. I've experienced it more and more. I crave presence, I crave relationships, but I also want to give. And it has been a journey. I see how impressive it is when we are truly connected. Do you have any final thought that would like to give us tonight? Any advice or any suggestion for us who have read your book or who are going to read your book?
Well, maybe just that, you know, we can sometimes get the impression that if I just do all the right things, I'll be happy all the time. And of course, we can't be happy all the time. And so, and it's really important to keep that in mind, because a lot of times, particularly when we look at other people's curated lives on social media, you know, everybody looks like they're having their best life, right? They're all on beautiful beaches and having great dinners and all that. And you can feel like you're the only one who has, you know, sad days and grouchy days, and, you know, everybody does. And so the difficulty with the way we present our lives to each other often is that we don't share that reality, that nobody's happy all the time. And it's not a matter of just doing the right things. There are certain things like, you know, like taking care of your health, like investing in relationships that make it more likely we'll be happy more of the time. But that moment-to-moment happiness comes and goes all day long. There's also it's called eudaimonic happiness. It's that sense that my life is basically okay. It's basically good, even on the days when I'm having a bad day. And that's a different kind of happiness that I think many of us want more of. That kind of long-term, sustained sense of well-being, rather than the expectation that we're going to be happy all day, every day, which is not the truth of anybody's life.
The eudaimonic versus hedonic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are gonna open for questions, and also Dr. Waldinger is gonna be doing some book signing at the end. But before, I would like to just tell you, Bob, you are a truly inspiring human being. You are a gift. Your work is a gift to all of us. To me, I'm very grateful to have you here. There is a Brazilian poet, her name is Cora Coralina, and she says something. It is of no value to pass through this life if we do not touch the heart of others. So thank you so much, Bob, for touching our hearts tonight. Thank you all, guys, for coming in. Let's open for questions.